He found Melody standing on her balcony, watching the stars dance across the sky while Michelle stood at her side, a comforting arm wrapped around her friend's shoulder. When she glanced back to see Adrian approaching, her breath caught in her throat.
What are you doing, Adrian? Leave Melody so she can think about what's going on.
I only came to speak with her without our parents here to listen.
Waited until Michelle backed off before he advanced toward Melody. If Adrian had ever been close to emotional, it would be now. However, all he felt was a dull sense of peace. He came out behind her and stood next to her, staring into the navy blue horizon. As he watched, the galaxies of the universe unfolded from the blackness, undulating slowly in the distance. They were silent for a moment. On an impulse, and mostly according to a sense of duty, he reached out and took her hand. He sensed mixed feelings of confusion and pleasure from her. She would be easy to handle, he was sure. Suddenly, she took her hand back and turned to face him, eyes worried and hesitant.
I meant to ask, when we're alone, of course.
She murmured, her gaze flickering from the door and back. A deep blush spread across her face, and Adrian could guess the topic of her discomfort.
What I mean is, I know you're probably not that you've had.
Her distress rendered her incapable of speech. She raised a hand to her mouth and was fighting hard to find the right words. Adrian waited, surprisingly patient, eyebrows raised. She gave a hopeless shrug.
Well, I never had. I'm still a virgin.
She whispered, and a pleading expression overtook her delicate features.
For our first time, could you?
She abruptly turned away from him, trembling slightly, her dark hair glossy under the moon. Adrian stepped to her, until his chest was pressed against her back, his gloved hands on her shoulders. He was not unlike a vulture, actually leaning forward and pressing his cheek to the side of her head. His hands moved down until they hooked around her waist, and Melody shyly put her own over his, leaning back into the comfort of his embrace.
I can be very gentle, love.
He murmured huskily into her ear, his warm breath sending a barrage of shivers down her spine. Her hands loosened on his, and his shot upwards like vipers, rudely cupping her breasts and pulling her hard against him. Her breath quickened with fear, her hands frantic against his, but his strength was astonishing. Melody didn't come near to breaking his grasp.
I give you a sweet breaking, but I want it to be kinky for the rest of the honeymoon, darling. I didn't agree to marry you so I could be the lapdog of the rest of eternity.
He held her for 1 second longer, then released her and turned to go back inside. He paused in the frame of the doorway and looked back at her. Her hair was disheveled, her face red with anger, and her eyes fierce. She held the balcony wall for support with one hand, and smoothed her flowing white dress with the other.
Don't worry, love. I'm sure you will enjoy it.
Those were the exact words that Adrian said to Michelle in that wonderful, wonderful flashback.
And me.
And me.
And me! Don't forget about me.
And me. You sleep with everyone. This doesn't even surprise me. So you would tell me that all my voice actresses, as well as Panty, have been messing around with Adrian. Even you, nostalgia kid?
Nah, I'm just kidding. I ain't no homo. I just want to see a cat fight.
In that case, I'm completely done with Adrian. Completely over him. I knew I should have stayed with Nostalgia Critic, because I know he cares about me. But wait, I believe the author is very confused at what she's writing about. He says it's the Melody, but ends up screwing Michelle, so how the hell does that make any sense? Well, this author already seems to be messed up to begin with. Not only that, but this has to be the most boring sex scene I've ever read since Why Romeo Hates Juliet. The build-up is not sexy, it's more of confusing and boring as well as aggravating. But that's how Chapter 5 ends. Chapter 6 opens up the next morning with Satan and Crystal working in the kitchen. They're talking to Michelle about Adrian and why she isn't allowed to talk to him. But it was completely boring, so I skipped over it. Adrian then approaches them and declares that he's going to take over hell. But that's not all! He also plants a sealed Mickey in the flask and accidentally lose it. That's one way of putting it. I wonder if he just announces while people are doing their everyday tasks. Hey, I got even a better idea. Why not trap Melody in the flask since Adrian doesn't want to marry her? Then another boring sex scene rolls around and Michelle starts crying. I mean, I've heard of crying after sex, but this is ridiculous.
Michelle looked up into his face and he could see the hurt in her eyes.
I want to love you, Adrian, but I can't. That's what's wrong.
Michelle cried softly into Adrian's chest as he held her close.
And I've set that aside to let you marry someone else who you don't love, and who doesn't love you. Because it does not please the treaty. Why is it so wrong for us to love each other? Why can't we be like normal people on Earth? Where does it matter whom we love?
He answered truthfully.
I don't know, love.
Michelle sniffled.
All I do know is my father is going to pay dearly for what he's putting the both of us through.
What do you mean, Adrian? You're not trying to take over hell again, are you?
When Adrian was silent, Michelle turned away from him.
It's one thing to try to end your marriage to Holly, but it's entirely different to try another hostile takeover, Adrian. I can't help you do it again.
Boy, Adrian flipped Michelle over so he could face her.
Why the bloody hell can't you?
Because I nearly killed myself to save your ass sooner than you can before.
Michelle replied nastily.
I pretty much sold my soul to your dad, and if you don't do what he said and try to take the throne by force again, I'll be sentenced to eternal damnation. I've done this all for you, and you're trying to throw us all away and seek revenge on everyone who is at fault for your captivity? I won't risk my soul by helping you. Not this time.
Michelle rolled over again as she felt the tears begin to fall.
Because I love you. But I can't sacrifice that again. I just can't. I'm sorry.
Adrian immediately felt ashamed for what he had done.
Love, I'm sorry. I don't know why I expect that from you, especially after everything you suffered through to make me happy. Please, forgive me.
Michelle froze. Never before in her life had she ever heard Adrian ask anyone for forgiveness.
I forgive you, Adrian. I love you too much not to.
She turned slowly, then placed a delicious kiss on Adrian's lips.
I will never hurt you again, I promise.
She cuddled against Adrian's chest and was about to fall asleep when she heard him say, again,
If you're not allowed to love, why the hell did you have sex? Chapter 6 ends and Chapter 7 opens up the next morning. Satan announces that Adrian and Melody will live on Earth for a marriage trial. However, Michelle has to go with him in order to keep Adrian on his toes. Another stupid idea. You already know these two are madly in love with each other. But you're marrying your son off to his girlfriend's best friend, who he can care less for. But we're here talking about a character named Vladis, who apparently is Adrian's best friend. He'll be staying at Melody's house with the rest of the Hell family. However, Michelle doesn't seem to like Vladis. Here's why. Vladis is like Adrian in both appearance and personality. However, during the time Adrian was in the flask, Vladis tried to rape Michelle. However, he was stopped by Satan. 2 words. Mary Sue.
Know your character is a Mary Sue when she is a victim of rape or attempted rape.
Now I get to hear Vladis' real motives.
form words in her mind. Michelle stared in stunned disbelief. Gladys was already a danger to what she and Adrian were attempting, and he had just arrived. She looked to Adrian, who seemed to be taking the situation lightly.
Well, if I wasn't being married off, I would have definitely done that as many times as possible within a 24-hour period.
Michelle hung her head to hide her embarrassment. Why did they even get along so well, anyway? She glanced at Satan, who looked like she felt terrified and uncomfortable. As she looked around the table, she realized everyone other than Adrian looked that way, which showed latest effect on people.
Well, since you're 80, you will need a place to stay before we make the trip to Earth.
Adrian was saying. He turned to Michelle.
Michelle, please take Vladis to his room. Then please meet with me in mine, so I can talk with you.
Afraid of Vladis, Michelle nodded weakly, then stood to lead the way to the extra bedroom. She walked silently down the hall, but she could feel Lada's intense stare like a laser burning into the back of her skull. Michelle slowly opened the door to the room and led him inside. She turned and watched in horror as he closed the door behind.
Now then, my sweet, I believe there's something I never got to finish last time I visited hell, isn't there?
Michelle swallowed and backed away. She recalled that event too well. It had occurred not long after Adrian's imprisonment. Vladis had come onto her and nearly succeeded in raping her. However, Satan arrived at just the right moment, so nothing ever happened. Vladis made Michelle swear to never tell anyone what happened, or he would make sure Adrian was never released from the flask. Michelle had lived in fear of him and his powers ever since.
Stay away from me, Vladis. I belong to Adrian.
I've heard about the deal with Satan,
He remarked, sitting on the edge of the bed.
Very romantic of you, Michelle, and sacrificial. Rather stupid, if you ask me.
He stood again, backing Michelle into the corner.
Now, you can't have him ever, and once he's married to that angel, your wonderful soul will belong to me.